So very good morning, students. Today we are going to discuss the chapter chemical bonding and the structure, atomic structure. This video is for the class 9 chemistry, and today we are going to discuss atomic structure and chemical bonding. So now see that as we know that whatever the periodic table, yeah, whatever the theory that you are reading, definitely it would have been discovered, yeah, done the experiment by some of the persons. So in this slide we can see that this is the history of the atom timeline. So who was the first person? The first person was the Democritus. The Democritus said that atoms are the smallest indivisible particle. So he just said about that theory only, and later on, one more scientist came. That name is the John Dalton. He also proposed some new ideas, some new theories on that. So what were the main postulates of the Dalton atomic theory? In the further slides, we will see in the theories. So after the John Dalton, the another person came with the Thomson. He also done some experiment and done some research and find out some of the fundamental particle. After that, one more scientist came. That name is the Rutherford in 1912. After that, the Bohr's atomic model, which is the also known as the modern theories, and on which based on which we are doing now, we are reading in our books. So now see what the Democritus has said. So the Democritus said that atoms are the smallest particle, means after which we cannot divide it. So John Dalton also thought about that, and he also done some research, and later on stage came to know that matter consists of the very small and the indivisible particles. Atoms can neither be created nor be destroyed. Means if once we have find out the atom, we cannot break it, we cannot destroy it, yeah, we cannot create it. The atoms of an element are alike but differ from other elements. Suppose if you are taking the elements hydrogen, so definitely that hydrogen atoms, the atoms will be alike, means they will be same in their behavior, same in their properties. But if you are taking the two different elements, if we are taking the two different elements, suppose let's take the example is hydrogen and the another example is oxygen. So if you're taking the hydrogen and oxygen, if you're taking the atoms of hydrogen as well as if you're taking the atoms of oxygen, so both the atoms, if you're comparing, they definitely will be the different properties. Now come to the fourth point. Atoms of an element combine in small number to form molecules. Atoms are the smallest unit of matter that can take part in a chemical reaction. So whenever any of the chemical reaction is happening, so the atoms are the smallest unit which take part in a chemical reaction. So this was all about the postulates of the Dalton's theory. Now next comes the J.J. Thomson cathode ray tube. So what the J.J. Thomson proposed the theory. He has taken one cathode ray tube. As you can see here, this is the cathode ray tube. He has taken the two electrodes. One electrode is the cathode, which is connected to the negative end of a battery at terminal. And he has taken the one more electrode, which is known as anode, which is connected to the positive end of the battery. So what he is trying to do that once he has started and he has taken the air at a very low pressure, and here the vacuum pump is there. Either if we want to insert the vacuum inside the tube, then we can just open that and the vacuum will be going inside. If we just don't want the vacuum, then we can shuck the vacuum from the cathode ray tube. So what the J.J. Thomson observed is that from this cathode electrode, some of the rays were coming out and they were moving towards the anode. As this cathode is connected to the negative terminal, a negative end, and from there some rays are coming. So he found that, as we know that there is a law, the negative always attracts the positive, and like charges repel. Suppose if a negative charge is coming out, and on the other end also if a negative charge is there, so definitely what will be happening, the deflection will be there, the repulsion will be there. But in this case, what was happening from this, if some rays are coming directly, they were going to the anode. It means that the rays which are coming out from the cathode was none other than some negatively charged particle. Why he came to know that it is a negatively charged particle? Because it was coming from the negative terminal end of the electrode, and it was moving towards the anode, and anode is connected to the positive end. So if the positive is there and it's that rays are attracted towards it, definitely it means that it is having the negatively charged. So based on that, only some deflection of the cathode rays are there. What he has done in this, the same experiment is there. But what he observed is that on this below the cathode ray tube, he kept one plate, and that plate was the positively charged plate. So as soon as from this cathode, the rays were coming out, as soon as the rays were coming out of from the cathode, he observed that these all the negatively charged particles and negatively charged rays attracted towards this positively charged plate. Why? Because we know that negative unlike charges attract each other. Now, based on that only, J.J. Thomson said some properties about the cathode rays. They travel from the cathode to anode in a straight line, as we have seen in the cathode ray tube diagram, how the rays were coming out of the cathode and they were moving towards the anode. Now comes to the second point, they cause a greenish yellow of fluorescence. So inside because the vacuum is not there and air is at a very low pressure, and the cathode rays which were moving from the cathode to anode, they were having some greenish yellow fluorescence. Now comes to the third point, they are affected by electric field, they are inflected towards the positive field and deflected from the negative field, so that they carry the negative charge. As we know that cathode rays are negatively charged, so they will be inflected, means attracted towards the positive field. And suppose if you are just showing the negative plate, a negative charge plate is there, then what will happen? Again it will be deflected from there. Now comes to the fourth point, they penetrate through the matter. As we know that if air, a vacuum is there, somewhat some of the air is present inside the cathode ray tube. If somewhat a very little amount of cathode ray air is there and the cathode rays are moving towards the anode, it means that they have the power, the cathode rays have the power to penetrate through the matter, because air is also containing some matter. So based on that only, Thomson concluded that cathode rays consist of negatively charged, now called electrons. So what we have seen that for the first time J.J. Thomson proposed the negatively charged is none other than the electron. So electrons have both definite mass and definite electric charge, both of which are independent of the nature of the gas in the discharge tube. So based on that, some properties of the electrons, you can see here the relative mass is 0.305 and the relative charge is -1. Charge is always 1, but it is a negatively charged, so we have written negative here. So what is the charge? And you can see here in the slash C is there, C is written, C means coulomb. That is the charge of, that is the unit of charge. So what is the charge of electron? That is -1.6 into 10 to the power -19. What is the mass? The electron mass is 9.11 into 10 to the power -31. Now we are going to see the Goldstein. This scientist has proposed the positively charged particle. On the later stage of time, it was known to be the protons. So now what is the discovery of the protons by the Goldstein? You can see he has also taken this tube, out of which he has taken here one electrode, and this electrode was connected to a terminal battery, and here also this anode electrode was connected to one of the terminal. So what he observed is that once he has given the electric current to this electrode, he observed something very new theory. He observed that from the same plate, from the one end, cathode rays were coming out, and from the another end of that electrode, some positive rays were coming out. As we know that cathode rays were the negatively charged particles because it was attracted towards the anode electrode, which is having the positive charge. But here comes the theory is that from the other end, the positive rays were coming out. So what are the properties of the anode rays? Anode rays travel in a straight line. They consist of the minute material particles and hence produce the mechanical effects. They are made up of positively charged particles. So for the first time, it was came to know that this positive charged particle which was coming out of the electrode was the positively charged particle. Anode rays consist of the positively charged particle which was called the proton. So in the first time, Goldstein proposed the positively charged particle named as a proton. So as we know from our previous knowledge that atoms are always electrically neutral. So they must contain some positively charged as well as some of the negatively charged. Because we know that each and everything in the universe is in a neutral state, means it is in a balanced state. For the same case applies for the atoms. If atoms are electrically neutral, it means that definitely the same number of positive charge, if it is suppose if it is having five positive charge, so when the atom will be becoming the electrically neutral, when the same number of negatively charged will be present in that atom. So this realization led of the discovery of protons came with a new concept by the J.J. Thomson that is known as the plum pudding model. So you can just assume that if you have seen the cake, how in the base of the cake there will be the lot of that base will be there, and top of the cake you will be seeing some of the extra cherry is there and some of the extra cream is there. So the same way, based on that only, he discovered this one plum pudding model. He said that in an atom it is a circular in shape, and the electrons will be on the base and the positively charged will be on the top of that. Yeah, in other sense, he means to say that the positive charge will be below like a base and the electrons will be in the top of the atom. So this was the model given by the J.J. Thomson. So what is the, according to J.J. Thomson, an atom is considered to be a sphere of uniform positive charge and electrons are embedded into it. The total positive charge is equal to the total negative charge, so that an atom as a whole is electrically neutral. The mass of an atom is considered to be uniformly distributed. So whatever the mass of the atom is there, it has to be uniformly distributed. It is not like that, that on the one side the more positive charge will be there and on the other side more of the negative charge will be there. It's not like that. It will be the totally uniformly, it will be distributed, the positive as well as the negative charge. Now comes the next, Ernest Rutherford. He was a student of the J.J. Thomson. He discovered the nucleus. Now see, based on which experiment he found the nucleus. So Rutherford experiment was gold foil experiment. He has taken one radioactive source here from which it will be bombarding the particles. Which particles? Alpha particles. And here you can see that he has taken one gold foil. Okay. This is one of the ring type is their detector, means so that rays can be bombarded to a particular place. It shouldn't be deviated. So that's why this has given. And inside the gold foil is there. So what Rutherford observed is once the alpha particles are bombarding into this gold foil. So what his observation was that most alpha particles travel through the foil undeflected. Means most of the alpha particle, they have directly passed. Once the alpha particle is bombarding onto this gold foil, it will be directly passing to this gold foil. It shows that there is a lot of empty space is there in the atom. Now, what was the second observation? Some alpha particles are deflected by the small angles. It has been seen that some of the alpha particles, they were deflected by the small angles. It shows that inside that atom, something is there which contains a positively charged. So that positively charged content source is nothing but the nucleus. So what was the third observation? Occasionally an alpha particle travels back from the foil. So some of the alpha particles were deflecting back. It means that inside the nucleus, inside the core part of the nucleus, there contains a very maximum number of positively charged, as this is also the positive charge. So due to which the positive and the positive charge are deflected and it returned back. So in this way, he found the nucleus by doing the gold foil experiment. So according to this model, the atoms contain a large empty space. Yes, we have discussed that because most of the alpha particles, they were passing directly. Now come to the second point. There is a positively charged mass at the center of atom known as nucleus, where the entire mass is concentrated. As we have seen that there is a positively charged mass is there because it was the alpha particles which were bombarded onto that, we are inclined from some angles. It shows that something is there, some positive particle is there. Third, the size of the nucleus is very small compared to the size of the atom. The size of the nucleus is very small as compared to the atoms, as we have seen that most of the alpha particles which were bombarded on the gold foil were directly passing the foil, which shows that the atom contains a very large empty space. If atom contains a very large empty space, means the nucleus is having a very small in size. Now see the fourth one, the electrons revolve around the nucleus at a large distance. Now come to the sixth point, electrons revolve around the nucleus in closed circular path known as orbit. As we know that nucleus is very small in size, which contains a positively charged, and where the electrons will be located. Of course, the electrons will be revolving around the nucleus, and the path in which it is revolving is called as orbits. So what are the drawbacks of the Rutherford? So Rutherford has explained everything in a well way. He discovered what is the location of the nucleus. Perfectly, he said that where the location of electron is there, the name, the location in which electron revolves is known as orbit. That also he has explained very perfectly. But in one point, he failed to explain that part. What is that? He explained that as we know that in the universe, everyone has its own energy. If in the, suppose let's take your example, once you wake up in the morning, you will be having a very good energy level. You will be feeling very energetic. But as the day has passed, while you're going to bed, you will be having a very less energy. It means that if any of the substance, if any of the atom is having the energy, after some time it will be decreasing. So the same concept applies for the electrons. As we know that electron has its own energy as it is moving towards the, as it is moving in the orbit. So what will happen after revolving for many times, it will be decreasing its energy, it will be losing its energy. So a time will come when all the electrons will be fall into the nucleus. So that was the main drawback of the Rutherford. So this drawback was explained by the Bohr's atomic theory. So what the Bohr said? Bohr said that electrons in an atom revolve around the nucleus in the circular orbits. So electrons in an orbit revolve around the nucleus in a circular orbit. Yes. Each orbit is associated with a definite energy. So these orbits are also called the energy levels. He said that if an electron is revolving around the nucleus, so that orbit will be having a definite energy level. And if that electron is moving in that orbit only, it won't be losing its energy. Yeah, neither it won't accepting the energy. So orbits are numbered as the 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 extra or the k element extra starting from the nucleus. So orbits are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. The first cell around the nucleus is known as K cell. The second cell from the nucleus is known as the L cell. The third cell from the nucleus is known as the M cell. The fourth cell from the nucleus is known as the N cell. You can see from this is the nucleus. The first cell, which is near to the nucleus, is known as the K cell. The second cell from the nucleus is known as the L cell. The third cell from the nucleus is known as the M cell. The fourth cell from the nucleus is known as the N cell. So definitely if the cell is there, definitely it will be containing some of the electrons. So how much and how many number of electrons will it accommodate? We have to see that. Now comes to the one more scientist with the name James Chadwick. He found the neutrons. So what all theory? Neutrons have no electric charge, means it is a neutral charge, means neither it will be having the positive or neither it will be having the negative charge. Neutrons have a mass nearly equal to the mass of a proton. So what is the mass of the neutron? The mass of the proton, whatever it is, it will be equivalent to the mass of a neutron. What is the unit of a measurement of the subatomic particle? It is atomic mass unit, that in the short form it is represented as AMU. So now see what is the nucleus and the orbit. The cluster combination of the proton and neutron, that part is known as the nucleus. And outside the nucleus, the negatively charged particle, that is electron, revolving around a circular path is known as orbit. If it is having the atomic number, proton and electrons are there. So what is the atomic number? Atoms are composed of identical protons, neutrons and electrons. So atoms are different because they contain the different number of proton. So why the elements are different from one another? Because the reason is that because they contains the different number of protons. That is the reason they differ from each other. So the atomic number of an element is the number of proton in the nucleus. How you will be representing? Let's take an example. The X represent here the symbol of an element. The symbol of an element. And the superscript, in the superscript, mass number is written. And in the subscript, atomic number is written. Let's take the example of the oxygen. So what is the atomic number of oxygen? 8. And what is the mass number of oxygen? That is 16. What is the symbol of oxygen? That will be O. So instead of X, O will be written here. Instead of mass number, the 16 will be written here. Instead of atomic number, 8 will be written here. So like this way it will be represented. Now what is the mass number? So mass number is the number of protons and neutrons in the nucleus of an isotope. So what is the mass number? In the nucleus, whatever the number of protons and whatever the number of neutrons that is present in a nucleus is known as its mass number. Let's take the example of the oxygen. So how much number of proton is there in the oxygen? That is 8. If 8 protons are there and mass number is 18, so how many number of neutrons will be there? So to find out the neutron is equal to mass number by the number of protons. So mass number is 18, proton is 8. So 18 minus 8 will be how much? That will be 10. So how many number of electrons will be there? As we know that whatever the number of protons and whatever the value of atomic number is there, the same number of the electrons will be there in that atom. So the electron will be how much? 8, because atomic number is 8 and the proton is also 8. This is a work that you need to do. Once you are seeing this slide, just pause the video and try to solve this into your copy so that you will understand better how to find out the mass number, how to find out the electrons, how to find out the protons, and how to find out the neutrons. Next comes the distribution of electrons in the different cell. So the distribution of electrons in the different cell was suggested by Bose and Bury theory. So this rule of distribution of electron was proposed by the Bose. So it's not like that if you're having the 20 electrons, the 20 electrons will be present in the one cell. It's not possible like that. So he proposed some rule. So what are the rules? He said that the maximum number of electrons in a cell is given by the formula 2n square, where n is the number of cell 1, 2, 3, extra. Means a cell can contain maximum number of electrons with the formula 2n square. Suppose if the cell is 1, then the formula will be how much? In the first cell or the K cell we can have 2n square. So here n represents 1 because this is the first cell. So 2 into 1 K square, it will be how much? That will be 2 electrons. In the second cell, how many electrons will be there? That will be 8 electrons. So like this way we have to find out the number of electrons that can be presented in the cell. The maximum number of electrons that can fit in the outermost cell is 8. Electrons cannot be filled in a cell unless the inner cells are filled. Suppose the K cell, it contains only the 2 electrons. So without fulfilling the K cell, we can't move on to the next cell. We have to fill the first cell first, and once it will become stable, we have to move on to the next cell. So like this way, it is there. Now we are going to see the distribution of that. Now in this slide, we are going to see the composition of atoms of the first 18 elements. Let's take the first, that is hydrogen. What is the atomic number of hydrogen? That is 1. What is the number of protons? The same as of the atomic number, the number of protons it will contain, that is 1. What is the number of neutrons? Because the mass number is 1 for the hydrogen, so to find out the neutron, the formula is mass number by the number of protons. So 1 minus 1 is equal to 0. Means the number of neutrons it contains is 0. And hydrogen is the only exception which is having the 0 neutrons. What is the number of electrons? The same as of the atomic number, and the same it contains the proton will be the value of number of electrons. So how the distribution of electrons will be there? K, L, M, N. Only one electron is there, and we know that in the first cell only maximum 2 electrons is there. So 1 is less than 2 or 1 is greater than 2? Of course your answer will be 1 is less than 2. So the 1 electron will be accommodated here in the first cell. So what will be the valency? Its valency will be 1. So what is the valency here? Before going to the next element, I will say you what is a valency. Valency is the combining capacity of an element. Now what is the meaning of that one? The combining capacity means, suppose one element is there and it's want to share its electron, want to gain some electron. So how much electron it can share, how much electron it can give, how much electron it can gain. So that number of electron, that is the combining capacity, because by giving that number of electrons only it is making a bonding with the other element. So that will be known as the combining capacity. So for the hydrogen, only one electron is there. To come into the stable state, it requires the 2 electron in the K cell. Yes or no? So now say me what is the valency? Either it can lose 1 electron or it can gain 1 electron. So in both the case, the valency will be 1 for it. Now comes to the helium. Atomic number is 2. Number of proton is 2. Number of neutrons will be 2. Why? Because the mass number is 4. So what is the formula to find out the number of neutrons? That is mass number minus number of protons. So that is 4 minus 2. It will be how much? That will be 2. So the number of electrons will be also 2. So how the distribution of electron will be there? That will be 2, because in the first cell we know that it can have only the 2 electrons. So what is the valency? As we know that once it get the duplet structure, matlab kya ho gaya? It will be in the stable form. So if an atom is in the stable form, it doesn't have to lose the electron, or neither it has to accept the electron. So based on that only, it is neither sharing its electron, neither gaining the electron from the other element. So due to which its valency is 0. Now let's do the one more, lithium. What is the atomic number of the lithium? That is 3. What will be the number of protons? The same value as of the atomic number, that will be 3. What is the number of neutrons? We know that its mass number is 7. So to find out the number of neutrons, mass number minus atomic number, that will be 7 minus 3, that will be 4 we are getting. What is the number of electrons? That will be 3. So how the distribution of electron is there? In the first cell, it will have the 2 electrons. So in total, it is having the 3 electrons. But in the first cell, we know that we can only accommodate 2 electrons. So as soon as we are trying to putting the third electron in that first cell, as that cell is stable, so what will happen? The third electron automatically will be jumping into the second cell, which is the L cell. So the 1 electron will be accommodated here. So what is the valency of this? Because we know that to come into the stable state of the duplet or in the octet, either it will be losing the 1 electron. So it will be losing the 1 electron to the another element. So that will be its combining capacity. So that is the valency, that will be 1. So based on that only the other are there. You have to do that by your own so that you can remember it perfectly. Now see what are the structure is there. Let's see for the lithium. As we know that atomic number of the lithium is 3. So the distribution of electron will be like this, that in the first cell it will have only the 2 electrons. So more 1 electron is left. So once we are trying to putting the third electron into this cell, it won't take because it has its own energy levels and it becomes the stable. So what will happen? The third electron, it will automatically jump to the next cell, that is L cell. So like this way, the orbital structure diagram you have to do for the first 20 elements. The same here we have done for the 18 elements that we have discussed. You have to do till the 20th elements. Now see what are the reducing agent and what are the oxidizing agent. So what is the reducing agent? Mostly whenever an atom or whenever an element loses its electron, whenever any of the atom loses its electron to come into the ionic state, to become an ion, that is known as the reducing agent. So what is the oxidizing agent? Whenever any of the atom gains one electron, gains some electron, then to become into the ion state, that is known as the oxidizing agent. Now see what is the isotope and what is the isobar. In the nature, many of the elements, same elements are there, but with a different mass number and with the same atomic number. So based on that only, yeah, either on the vice versa, with the same mass number but the different atomic number. So if this type of situation is there, based on that only, it's divided into two types. One is the isotopes and one is the isobar. So what is the isotopes? Isotopes are the atoms of the same element having the same atomic number but with the different mass number. Let's take the example of the hydrogen. Hydrogen is having the 3 isotope, means the same element hydrogen will be there but having the different mass number and with the same atomic number. So it is having the 3 isotope. The first isotope, it's known as the protium. The third isotope, it's known as the deuterium. The third isotope, it is known as the tritium. So in the protium, the atomic number is 1 as well as the mass number is 1. But once it comes to the deuterium, we can see that its mass number is 2 and the atomic number is 1. In the tritium, we can see its atomic number is 1 and the mass number is 3. So you can see that it is having the 3 isotope. Let's take the another example, that is the carbon. Carbon has 2 isotopes. They are, what is the atomic number of the carbon? We know that its atomic number is 6. And so it is having the 2 isotopes. For the first isotope, for the carbon, it is having the 12 mass number. For the second isotope, its mass number is having the 14. The same as for the, we can see that same atomic number, that is 6, and the different mass number, that is 12 and 14. So chlorine is also having the 2 isotopes. Now come, what is the isobars? So isobars are the atoms of different elements having different atomic numbers but same mass number. So isobars are that with having a different atomic number, with having a different atomic number, but having the same mass number. Let's take the example of the calcium and argon. As we know that argon having the atomic number that is 18, calcium having the atomic number that is 20, and both of this calcium and the argon having the mass number that is 40. If this type of elements are there, then we can say that it is a isobar. Now see, what is the difference between the isotope and isobar? What is the isobar? They have the same mass number but different atomic number. Okay, we know that same mass number but different atomic number. The best example that we have given is the calcium and the argon. You can see here the same mass number but different atomic number. Now come to the isotopes. They have the same atomic number but different mass number. Again, for the same example, for the carbon we can take same atomic number was there, but it was having the different mass number. One carbon was having the mass number 12 and another carbon was having the mass number that is 14. So isobar, number of electrons are different in the isobars. Isotope, same number of protons but different number of neutrons. Come to the third point, they have different chemical properties. So just remember that the chemical properties are dependent on the number of protons. So in this case, if the different number of protons are there for the two different elements, so definitely their chemical properties will be different. But now comes to the isotope. As we know that they are having the same chemical property, because for the same element only it is having the multiple isotopes. And if the same atomic number is there, it means that it will be having the same number of protons, the same number of positively charged particles. So due to which it is having the same chemical properties. Isobar, they are atoms of the different elements. Isobars, they are atoms of the different elements. Isotopes, they are atoms of the same elements. So in the isobar, we have seen that calcium and argon means different element is there. But in the isotope, we have seen the same type of element is there, like for the hydrogen, yeah, carbon isotopes, chlorine isotopes were there. So till now we have discussed what is all about the theory and what is the orbital structure, what is the isotope and isobars. Now here comes a very important part that is known as the chemical bonding. Why this atom want to form their bond? Why it's required? Why can't they be independent? Why they want to become a want to form a bond? Now see here, electrons are in energy levels around the nucleus electron cloud. Each and every electron has its own energy levels. The higher the energy level, the more energy is required for an electron to occupy that part of the cloud. The outermost part of the electron cloud contains the valence electron, that is valence shell. Maximum number of valence electron in an atom is 8. For each and every point we will discuss in the details. Now see here. Atoms are stable when they have the 8 valence electrons. When the atoms have 8 electrons, it is called an octet. Atoms must lose, gain or share electrons to attain the octet. So you can see this is the diagram. Moving into the details of each and every points. Now see, as we know that each and every energy cell has its own energy and the electrons are moving into that. So the higher the energy level is there, the more energy is required for an electron to occupy that part of the cloud. The outermost part of the electron cloud contains the valence electron that is known as the valence shell. As we have already read that maximum number of electrons that your valence electron in its outermost shell can have is 8. Then only it will be stable when it is forming the octet structure. But suppose if the outermost shell is not having the 8 electrons, if it is having the less than 8 electrons, it means that it is not in the stable state. And of course, each and every atom, they want to achieve their stable state. So what they can do to come into the stable state, either they can lose the electron, or they can share the electron, or they can gain the electron to come into the stable state. That it is its octet structure. So there is always an exception is there. There are two elements which become the stable by forming the duplet structure, that is the hydrogen and the helium. And the atoms which are near to the helium, like the lithium and the beryllium, they also become the stable, somewhat stable, by having the duplet structure. Now based on that only, there will be the two types of chemical bonding will be there. First is the ionic bond, which is also known as the electrovalent bond. Now what is the second? That is the covalent bond. So in the ionic bond, yeah, electrovalent bond, which all elements will be taking part? In the covalent bond, which all elements will be taking part? Let us see that. In the ionic bond, the metals and the non-metal will be taking part. Whenever any of the metal is there, like sodium, and the non-metal like the chlorine is there, whenever both of these, they are forming the bonding and form a NaCl. So in that type, ionic bond is there. So what is the covalent bond? Whenever the two nonmetals are there, or a metalloid plus nonmetal is there, then we can say that it's a covalent bond. So in the ionic bond, we can see that bonds formed between the metal and nonmetals are ionic and electrovalent. Total transfer of electrons from the metal to nonmetal is there. Metal atoms always lose their outer electrons to form the positive ions. Non-metal always gain electrons to become a negative ions. Ionic compounds are very stable because of electrostatic force of attraction between opposite charges is much higher. Whenever any element gain or lose electron, it becomes ions. Let us see here. All these 6 points we are going to discuss here in this with the picture diagrammatic representation. So this is the sodium atom. Once the sodium atom is losing the one electron, and this is a metal, so what is happening, you can see here the total transfer of electron is there from a metal to a non-metal. And once this sodium is losing its own electron, then it will become the ion, positive ion, a metal ion. And once this chlorine is accepting the electron from the sodium, it will become the negative ion, that is chlorine ion. Due to the total transfer of electron, and it will become the positive ion and it will become the negative ion. And we always know that the positive and the negative ions, they have a very strong force of attraction is there in between them. So due to which a very strong bonding is formed in between these two. So you can see some of the diagrammatic representation, Na plus Cl forming the ionic bond, how this sodium will be losing the one electron to the chlorine, and it will become the Na plus Cl minus. So we can see how we have done in the previous slides. So what is the ionization? When atoms gain or lose an electron, they become an ion. A sodium atom has 11 positively charged proton and 11 negatively charged proton. When it loses one electron to become more stable, it has 11 proton plus and 10 electrons, and it has positive 1 charge. Chlorine has 17 electrons. When chlorine gains 1 electron to complete the octet, it has 17 protons, but 18 electrons means one number of extra electron is there, due to which it's written the -1. It is now an ion with a negative 1 charge. So this is the Lewis representation of a simple molecule. So in the Lewis, we can represent the outermost electrons by showing that dot. That is known as representing of that element by the dot is known as the Lewis dot symbol. Let's see here. Here the N2 is there. 5 plus 5 means its atomic number is how much? That is, sorry, in the outermost shell it is having how much electrons? That is 5. So in the total, how many electrons is there total in both the nitrogen? That will be 10. So we know that remaining 8 electrons means how much more electrons are there? So it will be required, see here, we know that remaining electrons means 8 electrons are required to come into the stable state. So we can see that out of this nitrogen, 3 electron from this nitrogen and 3 electron from this nitrogen, they will form a bond in between them, and whatever the rest electrons that doesn't take part in the bonding, these 2 electrons will be represented by the dot. So this representation of a elements by a dot symbol is known as the Lewis representation. So that part is very easy. You can just go through your book. It will be very easy for you to understand. Now comes to the next, that is the covalent bond. So we know that atoms that share electrons form the covalent bonds. If atoms have a covalent bond and are same type of atoms, they are known as the diatomic molecule. So based on that only, whenever any of the bonding is happening in between a non-metal and non-metal, just take the example, this is chlorine is also a non-metal and this chlorine is also a non-metal. So whenever the bonding is there in between the non-metals and non-metals, it will be having a covalent bond. So while sharing the electrons, either it can share 1 electron, either it can share 2 electrons, either it can share 3 electrons. Based on that only, it is again divided into the types of covalent bonds, that is single bond, double bond and triple bond. So what is the single bond? A single covalent bond is formed when 2 atoms bond and share a single pair of electrons. Whenever a single pair of electron is shared in between the two elements, it is known as a single bond. If the 2 electron is shared in between the elements, then it is known as a double bond. If the 3 electrons are shared in between the 2 atoms, then it is known as a triple bond. So you can see in the single bond, here this hydrogen is having the 1 electron and this hydrogen is also having the 1 electron. So this 1 electron and this 1 electron, so they want to share the electrons. So how many electrons they will be sharing to come into the stable state? That is 1. So in between them only the 1 bond will be there. Only 1 bond will be there, which is known as a single bond. So double bond you can see, triple bond also you can see how they have done. This is the lone pair of electrons. The electrons which are not taking part to form a bond are known as the lone pair of electrons. So based on that only, again it is divided into the 2 types. One is the non-polar covalent bonding and the polar covalent bonding. So what is the polar covalent bonding? And what is the non-polar covalent bonding? So the non-polar covalent bonding electrons shared equally between the 2 atoms, no charge on the atom. So the non-polar covalent bonding will be there when both the atoms are of same energy, are of the same level. Like you can see here in the chlorine and the chlorine, both are the non-metal, both are having the same energy level. So whenever the sharing of electron is there in this type, it will be known as the non-polar covalent bond. But what is the polar covalent bond? Bonding electrons shared unequally between the two atoms and the percentage charge of atom is there. Just see here in the hydrogen and the chlorine, both are the different type of elements are there, and out of which the chlorine will be having the more electronegativity charge. So due to which a partial distribution of charge is there in between these two elements. Based on that only it is known as the polar covalent bond. So here students, we have completed our atomic structure and the chemical bonding. If you are having any of the doubt, you can just put your message on the in the comment section. It will be very helpful to you. So thank you students.